I need to get myself in gear. So the previous chats that I had, I felt prepared and I'd written the questions like well in advance, and I thought, right, I know what I'm doing. And still, it wasn't the greatest, but I'd rate my previous ones between a 5 and a 6 out of 10 in terms of flow. So we'll see how this one goes.
I'm good with that.
Okay, Doddy, Andrew Dodd.
Yep.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Does your family refer to you as Doddy?
Pretty much, yeah. My dad still calls me boy.
Yeah.
My sisters don't call me anything. They just bro or whatever. My wife calls me D.
Okay.
My wife's side of the family call me Doddy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it just feels weird saying your full name. That's all.
It does. I can't even say it.
Once described as the David Attenborough of bikes.
Oh, wow. Who by?
I found it in a comment section in YouTube. You've made a name for yourself as the oracle of bike tech, I would say. Journalist, content creator, photographer, and now brand communications manager at Mondraker. It's a long list to add to the CV, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of, but it's all like the same, isn't it? So,
does it feel that way? Does it feel like it's not?
Do you know what?
Changed?
Right this second, it does feel like there's a marked change actually, and it's until earlier this year, it'd been 22 years. It would have been this year, just doing the mountain bike media side of things. So, although I'm kind of going to still be working in the same circles, it's a very different job and a very different way of working. And although everyone at work is super welcoming and stuff, as it would be, I'm still like trying to sort of find my place. You know, I know what my sort of targets are and what I've got to do, but I mean, hey, it's been 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
So early days.
I did feel like approaching you at this early stage was maybe a slightly premature, but I think it's good to get this sort of early perspective on where you are, and it'll be interesting to come back in 6 months' time, maybe a year's time, and then
maybe I'll come up to you.
Yeah, that would be the thing to do. We need to get out and ride and see what these Mondraker bikes are all about.
Definitely.
Let's start at the beginning. Where did this obsession with bikes begin?
Can blame my father for that, I guess. So my father and his brother, they rode bikes everywhere. My dad would regularly ride to Europe and back, rode to Cortina. Back in the day when you would have had flip-flop gearing, so you'd had a climbing gear and a descending gear, and top of the mountain, swap your wheel around, that sort of thing. I've got some really archived pictures. My dad's actually a strange guy. He doesn't talk about the past much, and he's got this amazing past of things he's done. And it's only been in the last sort of 4 or 5 years I've managed to sort of like dig through photos and stuff. And I don't know if it's unlucky for him or me, but we look exactly the same if you look back at these old pictures. So the bikes were always from him. And my first, what you could class as a mountain bike, was a 24-inch wheel Peugeot Lynx, which had steel everything. High tensile steel, the cheapest steel you could get. So the thing probably weighed, I don't know, probably 50 pounds, and could lift it up as a kid. And it had 15 gears on there. There was Sachs Hero gears, friction shift, just big old thumb shifters, and I rode it everywhere.
Yeah.
Rode the bike absolutely everywhere. Forever breaking things on it, forever getting punctures. Remember my dad with mole grips straightening out the rims because they were just quite soft. He used to ding them all the time. And eventually, I don't know at which point this was, I'd say about 89, maybe 1990. My dad came home from badminton, which was his other thing that he used to love. And the guy he used to play with, I never knew his name as Batman. Clearly wasn't his name. And he had a carrier bag full of MBUK magazines dating back to number 1, which was, I think it's either October or midsummer 1988, which I've still got in the workshop.
Oh, that's true geek. That is knowing the month that it started.
Yeah, well, I've actually got 2 copies of it because the one that he gave me, I wouldn't want to touch it. It would fall apart. And I managed to find one for sale, which I paid a bit of cash for. And I went back, read everything, studied it. It became the Bible because at the time there wasn't really anything else. There was like MTB Monthly, there was a few of those around, and then later there was Mountain Biker International, MBA, the US magazine that Richard Cunningham used to edit, and basically I just any source of information I could get, which was only print in those days, read everything, studied everything, and didn't really think about it ever turning into a career. It was just the thing I was obsessed with. and then started going to races with friends. And even the first race, I think it was the Bransgore Bash or something like that down near Puddletown, down that way. And I remember turning up, and we were in the back of my friend's camper van with his parents, and my face was like pinned to the window because it's like, oh my god, there's more of us. You know, you got to think back then. I was living in suburban, well, Middlesex really, so not really London, but just outside of London, and we had to ride probably an hour to get to trails, and we thought nothing of it because we were young. We just rode bikes everywhere. And suddenly turning up at an event where there was like loads of other like-minded people, it was like we just discovered fire. Like it's this brand new thing, and we felt totally exclusive. Obviously, this thing's happened in many other sports and industries and stuff, but in my mind as a young kid, it was like the best thing ever. Yeah. And that was it. Completely hooked.
I grew up in the southeast as well, and I used to read MBUK and see all the bikes that were in there, and a lust over owning one of those bikes one day, and they seemed so far out of reach. And I remember a friend of mine, my riding buddy, he bought an orange Patriot.
Yeah, nice.
We lived in Essex, so owning an orange Patriot in Essex was just like, why have you got that bike? But the want for the most inappropriate bike, despite living there, it was strong. I don't know how you felt about, like, did you end up on a suitable bike for what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, it was all rigid to start with, and the first proper bike I got was a Muddy Fox Courier Mega, which incidentally the guys from Retro Bike managed to find one at a car boot sale or a police auction, and they gave it to me. I think they paid like 25 quid or something.
Wow.
Random. So I've got it in the loft, which it's not in bad condition. I want to do it up a bit to kind of look how it was when I last rode it. But that bike was pretty good. It had like a Shimano Dior, no, it's a 400 LX it had on there. My dad got me a flex stem for it because suspension forks were only just on the market and they were just too out of reach. They were nearly the price of the bike. I think the bike was probably about 400 quid or something like that, which was seriously expensive as a first bike.
Sure.
You know, and I now realise, you know, the true value of money.
What year would that have been, do you think, roughly?
92?
Yeah.
One.
So that sort of money on
91. I'd say 91 because I've got some old number plates up there from Malverns. I know I did 91, 92, 93, but I don't know if I did 90 as well. And the first year I did it was the year I got the bike. Yeah. So I guess 91.
Yeah. It's like the idea of spending £500 on a bike when you were that sort of age. And I mean, for me, it happened late 90s. And to get a £500 bike, and that was actually how much my first proper bike cost, which was a Scott Octane. Yeah. It was a dual slalom bike, though. They did a full suspension version. They did a hardtail Scott Octane. And it was actually an appropriate bike for where I lived. It was a great little jump bike, fulfilled everything I wanted to do. Wasn't ideal when I moved to North Wales and I tried to ride up the Marin Trail for the first time with about 8 gears. But you studied journalism at college? Yeah, kind of. Okay. So I did it wasn't a BTEC National, it was a GMVQ. I did whatever the first year one was because I didn't know what I wanted to do, so year course. And I did the advanced, which was 2 years following that. And it was, media communication. So I did photography, did video stuff, although it was all VHS and the music stuff was reel to reel that we were doing cutting and splicing using Revox machines. And photography was, developing photos in dark rooms and stuff. So in fact, I was talking about this with my wife last night, just thinking that's almost a whole level of stuff that we just might not see repeated. No, again, I don't think you will. And it was amazing to do. The video editing, doing reel to reel, was wild. Really, we were literally cutting and splicing. Wow! So it was basic, rudimentary, but you kind of learnt the major things you need to learn. What a place to earn your stripes and properly learn the industry. Yeah, and at the time, I think you could probably say I had no direction. Not through anyone's fault. I was just literally obsessed with bikes. Bikes and DJing were the two things that have always been a constant. The music was just a thing I did with my friends, so it was never seen as anything else. But bikes, I knew somehow there had to be a way of having a career with bikes. I just was not forward thinking enough to think like that. And it was actually my sister. I've got two older sisters, and it was Annie, the younger of the two. At the time, she was the editor of a student magazine, and I was really, really interested in what she was doing. I think it's called Bacchus or something like that. University of West England. I think it was a polytechnic before it was a university. And
yeah, I was fascinated by it, and she sort of poked me in the direction of publishing, and I tried everything to get work experience at Future Publishing. I sent letter after letter after letter, to the point it was like hassling them.
Yeah.
And eventually, completely out of the blue, got a letter back from them saying, "Oh, we've got a week's vacancy at this date. Do you want it?" And it was just like, literally couldn't pick up the phone quick enough. Hadn't thought about how I was going to get there or where I was going to stay or any other things, but went down there. And because at the time I was working in bike shops, I should probably skip back a bit actually. So, sorry, I've kind of ruined your podcast.
But there's no timeline, so we can jump around.
We could jump around.
Yeah.
Okay, so the bike racing and all that stuff went on for years, and despite my dad being really into cycling, it was actually a close school friend, Jay Bartlett. I went with his parents because his parents were both racing. His sister was racing, and it just became like a little mobile clan. And we were team dances with wheels. We had these blue T-shirts with a pink wheel on the back, dances with wheels like the Daniel Day-Lewis film.
Yeah.
And I never realised that was a cool name for a team until I became a bit older and saw the film.
Yeah.
And some of the best years of my life, going to all these races and Malverns and Cheddar Challenge and just loads of like South Coast races. And went to college, did all that stuff. And then actually, instead of going to university, because I was still obsessed with bikes, I decided to not do university and went to work at Waitrose, actually.
Okay.
So I was working in a warehouse at Waitrose. My hours were 1 till 6 p.m, 6 days a week. So I went out every night and rode bikes every morning. Yeah. That's all I did. That was my life. I was obsessed by it. And my parents were kind of pleased I was working at somewhere half respectable, because they had the partnership thing where you'd get a discount and you'd get a bonus. And actually, with my first bonus, I brought a pair of Technics 1200 Mark II turntables, which I still got. And both my parents weren't that approving of that. Yeah. And then I sacked that job in and went to work in a bike shop, of which I knew my dad wasn't pleased, but he didn't mind it. Whereas my mum, I don't think appreciated it whatsoever. Okay. And she was like, "Oh, tell him, John." And Dad never told me. Yeah. Because he just knew that was something I was going to follow. Yeah. So did the riding, and in the background I was sending all the letters to Future Publishing, which is when I got those letters. So because I was working in a bike shop, I was pretty handy actually at bike mechanics quite early on, because I think I had some really good tutors as a kid. So at high school, I used to hang around the local bike shop like a lot of young kids used to do, to try and get freebies and stickers and this and that. And eventually they gave me a Saturday job, and that was called The Bike Shop in North Harrow. And Malcolm Fryer, he might not realise it, but got a lot, I owe him a lot really. He taught me everything, taught me how to build wheels. I was building wheels when I was like 16 I had no qualifications. They taught me everything. Amazing. Taught me, how to use torque wrenches and the importance of things like that need to be calibrated by official garages and stuff, and all the stuff that you just never really think of that goes into trade. And I was a kid, so I wasn't really taking it on until much later in life. You start realising that actually I had a lot of skills and background was built back then.
Amazing. Moving forwards to eventually the career that you were about to forge, I understand that you had a pretty big accident on the Kona that you had, and that perhaps set the wheels in motion to where you are today.
Yeah, so the week I did work experience at MBUK, Paul Smith, again, a guy that was almost like a father figure to me in publishing. He was like the oracle of tech in those days. What he didn't know wasn't worth knowing, like absolute, And he could see that I knew my way around a workshop. And he's like, "Oh, do you reckon you could like build some wheels or something?" I was like, "Yeah, great." Built some wheels. And as soon as he saw that I was just hands-on doing stuff, he gave me a set of forks and said, "Why don't you try writing a review on these?" He goes, "It's not for print. I just want to see, what you think, what your thoughts are, how you think." And those forks are a set of Stratos FR.
Or delivery. I'll get it.
Yeah.
Interlude.
Oh, it's the fruit and veg. Awesome. We try and get as much stuff locally as possible.
That's good. We need to do the same, to be honest. I would like to do the same. We should talk about healthy eating, actually. Yeah. That's an area that is of interest to me. So, yeah, these forks were less than ideal, I understand.
Well, I was 20 years old or whatever I was at the time, and I left Bath with a set of forks that were worth probably 800 quid, maybe. I don't know. I'm totally guessing. So I felt amazing. I got a set of new forks, went to show them to all my mates, went riding, rode them loads, and I was definitely in the era where I was just breaking stuff all the time. Not necessarily because being good or anything. I think everyone goes through a process where you break a lot of stuff because you try new things and you're not as smooth as you should be and so forth. And this particular day, I was working at Action Bikes in Staines, of all the places, and there's a road called the Causeway, and they've got this big extended curb. I used to jump off it every morning on the way to work, across the road, and this one morning it just snapped, which I other than I know that's what happened, I couldn't say anything about it. So I woke up in hospital and they basically shaved my hair off. So when I was working at MBK, I had like long shaggy hair for a while. I kind of had hair like that earlier on. They shaved it all off because I basically skidded down the road on the side of my head. I still had the helmet strapped on with a few bits of polystyrene. I was wearing like a BMX piss pot style lid. So arguably, it really helped. Couldn't say it saved my life or anything, but I was in a right mess. You know, broke my nose, my cheek, my eye socket, my ear was kind of hanging off. It was pretty nasty. My girlfriend at the time cried. She didn't even recognise me when they dropped me home. Because went to work with long blonde shaggy hair, came home with a skinhead and eye closed up and all that stuff.
And then off the back of that, you wrote a letter. Yeah,
I wrote a letter to Smithy with a kind of, well, it wasn't really a review. It's kind of just summarising what had happened, and had a bit of humour in it because I was like, I think I said I looked like John Merrick, like the Elephant Man, because my head was just kind of all swollen up, and he obviously thought it was pretty funny, and he passed it on to the managing editor, which was Mick Taylor, I think his name was, and he sent me a letter not far after that saying there is a vacancy, and he was like, this isn't an offer, but there's a vacancy and we think you should apply for the job. And that was for Jamie Hibbard's old job as staff writer.
Right.
And I applied for the job, went for an interview. I'm amazed that I actually even got the job, because I went to the interview and I was wearing basketball vest, I'm going to say, with baggy jeans, chain around my neck, like spiky hair by this point, all this sort of stuff. And I went in there and people were in suits and ties and stuff, and I was like, oh well, it's done. And even the interview, that was my first experience of anything vaguely corporate. So there was someone from HR, there was, I don't know, various people from Future Publishing in the boardroom, all on one side of the table, and then Tim Manley, the editor, the GOAT, was there. Tim came round and sat opposite me, and we just chatted. And other people basically were nothing to do with it. They were just there. And we chatted for what felt like an hour. And I left, and I said, oh, thanks for the opportunity, thinking, oh, well, that's done. And went to Peach Express to meet my parents and said, oh, yeah, I've messed that up. And they never actually told me I'd got the job. I was moving from Action Bikes, moving on back to Harrow, and I contacted them because I wanted to make sure I got the letter to say that I hadn't got the job. And they were like, oh, no, you got the job. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, when can you start? And this was like on a Thursday or something ridiculous. And my boss at the time was in the background. He's like, did you get the job? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, go on then, off you go.
Whoa.
So I basically had my 21st birthday in Harrow, and at the weekend moved to Bath, and then started work on the Monday, more or less.
Wow. Was it hard moving to Bath and starting a new job, starting a new life, and on your own, I assume?
Well, yes and no. Yes, leaving friends and stuff, but it was also the exciting opportunity of something new and different and unknown. And I hadn't really thought it through, if I was honest. You know, I was young and naive and didn't care, just wanted to do that. But my sister was living in Bath. So I lived with her for, I will say 6 months. She will probably say far longer than that. And eventually got a place.
Okay.
And it was fine. It was no problem. But went into a world of publishing that I knew nothing about. And it was kind of the back end of the golden years of print publishing, when future publishing was absolutely massive. And there was such a culture of entertaining and drinking and people hanging out all the time. And I felt like I was basically the youngest person in the company at the time. So a lot of people wanted to know who I was because I was young. And I remember saying to someone, oh, you know, does anyone meet up for drinks or something after work? And they were like, yeah, just go to the Garrick's Head. And I was like, oh, what day? And they're like, oh, any day. like I was stupid. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, just go any day. There'll be people there.
Yeah.
And I remember riding past my BMX sort of sheepishly looking through the window to see if anyone was in there. And it was rammed. It was like Tuesday night or something.
Yeah.
And there was always a company car behind the bar. And it was always rammed with different people. And the next sort of 5 years were like a whirlwind of, oh my God, like this is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Hanging out with all these different people, learning all these new things, going riding on all these crazy places with all these amazing people, like Martin Ashton, for example. And it was incredible.
It seemed like back then there was more of a drinking culture in no matter what industry you were in.
Yeah.
And like obviously there's negatives to that, but the positives are that that socializing that you do outside of work is where your real proper bonds are made.
Absolutely. And actually I think a lot of business happens in
Yes.
those environments as well. You know, regardless of the drinking, it's the hanging out, the people spending time face to face, which, you know, obviously as a result of lockdown, you're starting to see there's definitely a negativity with working from home.
Yes.
You know, you just don't get the interaction with people.
No.
Which I'm a people person. I like being around people. I never liked working from home in lockdown. You know, it was great being with the family, like that side of things, but I need to be around people to be in a creative environment.
Yeah.
So that was really difficult.
It's healthy. I think honestly that face to face, that in person, relaxed environment that you find yourself in, especially when you're out the pub or whatever. I think it's important for everybody, for your mental health, for just it's when you miss that, you don't realise that that's the thing you're missing. I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's for me doing this podcast. I think it's really important that I meet people face to face because you just the minute that you're on a computer screen, you're just a face on the screen.
It's not the same, is it?
It's not the same.
No.
And I, yeah, for me, it's so important, and I think something that we all need to pay attention to.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So, obviously, going to MBUK gave you the opportunity to travel a bit, and I understand that you went to Whistler for the first time, and it was a bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah, so that was for I'm going to say it was Marzocchi for their presentation for their new forks. All I remember was I've got to go to Canada. And I knew nothing about it at the time because a lot of the stories that you would see in the magazines in those days used to have a lot of sort of backcountry adventure stories, but it's very much touring based, not necessarily the stuff that I was more into in those days. Arrived at Whistler, I didn't even take a full face helmet. I might have had knee pads, but literally like so unprepared, and turned up at this place with chairlifts and runs coming off the mountain. And it was a bit like, whoa, this is what? You know, and I had no idea how to gauge myself. I was comfortable at riding, but I had no idea on where I was on the scheme of things with the trail grading. And I remember the first run I did, I rode down Beeline and thinking, oh, well, that was a bit rubbish, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then I saw Wade Simmons and Brett Tippie, who were on the Marzocchi thing at the time, and they were like, you're that kid from MBUK. They're like, can you jump? And I was like, yeah, I could jump. And they're like, come with us.
Wow.
And rode down A-line behind Tippie with Wade behind me. And I was like, do I need to look out for anything? Is there like doubles or step downs? And they're like, it's all tabletops. You'll be fine. Just stay at the same speed as us. And yeah, so my first run down A-line was behind Tippie with Wade literally almost buzzing me.
Were you casing things or were you sent?
No, it was like, no, I mean, I'm all right riding. I'm comfortable with jumping and stuff. And in those days, I mean, they were much bigger than anything in the UK at the time, but they were so well built.
Yeah.
This was the thing that was shocking. You know, I remember both of them saying, like, as long as you're over the first jump, you're fine.
Yeah.
It's built so well. You don't need to brake check. You don't need to do like little safety pedals. You just cruise. And you can pick up or you can push through them. You can do what you want. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is insane.
Yeah.
And then tried to tick off as many of the trails as I could.
My brother actually lived in Whistler for many years, and he still keeps trying to convince me to go out there. Yeah. And every time I see A-line, everyone says it's one of those lines that you can just, like you say, hit the first jump, and all the rest is predictable.
Yeah, and do you know, I went back there in 2017 with Blake and Martin and stuff, and I probably think differently now, but almost to the point I think my bubble had kind of burst with Whistler because I was fortunate enough to go pretty much every year for, I reckon, probably 8 years maybe.
Wow.
and saw the place just growing and growing and growing. And every year I went, you tick off all the new trails and you just ride everything. And it was such a long time since I'd previously been that everything had just moved on massively. Now, A-line was still fine. Some of the jumps were a bit bigger, but the same flow is there, the same appeal. But I remember going to look at Crabapple Hits, which I'd ridden previously with Wade, and they were big in the early days, but they were quite flat jumps. They were just long tabletops. I think the biggest was still about 50 foot, so still a fair length, but no lip. Felt super safe and easy to hit them. And I remember going back and seeing the size of them now, and I was like, yeah, I've moved on. I reckon I could jump them, but I'm like, no way. I don't have the guts for that anymore.
No.
And I've got nothing to prove, and I'm all right with that.
Well, as the bikes have grown and become more capable, it seems like the trails are doing the same.
And
thing.
everyone there, seemingly, is leagues better than you as well.
Yeah.
You know, old, young, male, female, doesn't matter. Everyone shreds. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Did you find yourself getting a bit starstruck when you were meeting these sort of legends of the sport?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm like, I'm a super fan.
Yeah.
I love mountain biking, and I've spent the last over 2 decades promoting my favourite thing.
Yeah.
I love it, and I want everyone to love it as much as I love it. So getting to meet all these people for the first few times was really strange. I'd been at the magazine maybe 2 weeks, and the editor, Tim, rang me up. He used to ring me every week, and we chat for about 2 hours on the phone, just about stuff and the world going around and cricket and all sorts of things. And he was like, what are you doing for the next 2 weeks? And I was like, I don't know. You tell me. Like, you're the boss. He's like, you're going to go to France. Okay, great. Sounds good. Steve Gill's going to come and pick you up. And I was like, Steve Gill's going to come pick me up.
Yeah.
So Steve came round, and he was super easy straight away. You know, he was like, oh, so you got a 20-inch. What is it? I was like, oh, it's S&M Homes. And we started talking about BMX and other stuff. And straight away I was like, it wasn't Steve Gill anymore. It was just Gilly. Cool guy to chat to. And it kind of made me realise, actually, everyone's just normal people that just love bikes. Just you see them outward facing very differently. But then we went to meet Rob Warner at his place in Henley. So we picked him up, and then there was Martin Ashton, Martin Hawes, and Warner drove his own van. He had like a white Vito, and I was in the MBUK Nissan Patrol, and Steve Gill was driving that, and then with Horsey and Ashton, and we laughed what felt like hysterically all the way from there to Annecy in the Alps, where Pete Tompkins has got a house out there, and we stayed with Pete for a few days, did some content, and then we started moving down south, and eventually all the way down to Barcelona, and then back again.
What trip?
And videoed it all, which was weird because I actually made a video from that trip, and they put it as a cover mount on the magazine.
No way.
And I haven't got a copy of it. I don't know where it is. I'm hoping someone's put it on YouTube, but I've never found it if I've looked for it, and I would actually like to see it just for old time's sake, because some of the stuff we saw, we went to Geordie Terrace, his house, like the Trials giant, and Adam Rago was there doing stuff on a Trials motorbike back then that no one had ever even seen. He was like doing back hops and hopping up stuff like a bicycle on a Trials bike. It's just like, whoa. And obviously now what you see Tony Bow and other people doing is just, it's almost commonplace, but still mind-blowing. And I don't think I ever really realised at the time how fortunate I was to be seeing what I was seeing with the people I was with, and going to all the places and having people like Steve Pete messaging me, and you're like, you know, I wanted to screen grab it and show it to my friends, because it's just like, Pete, he's just messaged me.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, obviously I've been around the block a bit now, and they're just great humans. And actually I think mountain biking compared to where all my friends work, I feel like it is really quite unique in the fact it's actually pretty small.
One of the most nervous interviews I've done with anyone was with Steve Pete, and I was at Fort William during the World Cup, and we were in the tent at the back, and I knew Marshy quite well, mechanic, and I asked Marshy if he wanted to do an interview, and I was making content for a fairly small website at the time, and Ride It Out was the website. And
Rob used to run it, didn't he?
And
he used to live in Bath, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
And I said, oh, do you think I could get an interview with Petey as well? And he was like, yeah, I can't see why not. Let's go and ask him. And he said, yeah, sure. I'll be 20 minutes. I'm like, oh god, I'm not ready for this.
Yeah.
And I just had a camera with a shotgun mic on top, and he ended up sitting in the tent, which was just completely white. And I got the camera out, like had settings on auto, and I was holding it in one hand. My arm was just dying.
Yeah.
I'd written just some questions on my phone, and I thought, I can't do all this at the same time. And I said, look, can I give you my phone and you just read the questions and answer them? And it turned into my most awkward interview. And we'd thrown in some silly questions as well. And I'm not even going to go into it, but some of his answers, like he didn't really get it, and it's my fault. I didn't word it very well. And I remember coming out of it thinking, this interview is never going to see the light of day. Yeah. I hope it doesn't. And I've still got it on an old hard drive, and I dread to think. I'd like to speak to him on this podcast at some point, but I hope he doesn't remember it. Put it that way. But
do you know what? He may well do. He's pretty unique, like the stuff he remembers and the era. Yeah, he's still got that presence even now. And actually, he's one of the few people. You know, I'm comfortable around Steve, but you're still like, oh, that's Petey.
To me,
he still has that thing.
He was at the peak when I was reading all the magazines like obsessively, buying MPUK every month. He was the man. Talking of reading the magazine, you were obviously writing reviews about products, and I was the one consuming those reviews and actually making arguably pretty big financial decisions based on what you were saying, your colleagues were saying. Did you find that it was quite a difficult balance to balance your commercial responsibilities to the brands that you're reviewing, but also your genuine personal opinions?
Well, if you skip back to when I started, I wasn't allowed to review anything. So Paul Smith was the tech head. I'll say he was a tech head at the time. He was like, you're not reviewing anything. You're not writing about anything. Right? What you're going to do is ride every bike you can possibly ride. Yeah. And every time you ride a bike, tell me what it was like. I want to know what you're thinking. And that's basically what he made me do for, I don't know how long. Could have been a year, could have been longer, to be honest. And he made me really aware of, the responsibility with doing product reviews. Because, let's face it, there's a lot of product reviews. I mean, even more so on the landscape today. But in print, it was a bit easier to manage because to have a print magazine in the first place, you had to be part of some kind of organisation that could afford to do it. And each of those organisations would have had an editorial and a commercial background. Now, I think a lot of people will probably work this out, that in those days, they used to clash massively. We could not stand advertising because they would be trying to find out what we're reviewing, what we're going to say about it, and they'd be trying to sell an advert to the distributor of that product. And from the editorial point of view, it's like, we didn't care. We don't care if it's good or bad. Yeah. You know, sometimes you wouldn't want to put a bad review in. It wasn't because you didn't want to say it was bad. It's just like, there's just better things to put in rather than just filling up of, people want to read about something that's good so they can go and buy it or something like that. So, from here and there, you would get something that is bad and you'd be like, this is awkward. So the first port of call, you would speak to, in my case, it was Paul Smith before he moved on. You would speak to the editor, the tech ed, and you'd discuss it and be like, this is what it does. And if it was something that bad, then you would speak to a few other reviewers and be like, just a sounding board, go and have a go on that. Yeah. And not tell them what you're thinking, see what they say. So there was definitely a process, and I'm sure it would be the same with different publishing houses, because there was a responsibility to it. And I mean, maybe that's the thing we could pick up on later, how that's changed with .com, like massively. Yeah. Suddenly there was loads of bike reviewers out there and loads of bike journalists out there. It's both brilliant, but also something I will always remember is there's a guy that used to run Specialised UK called Richard Hemmington. I don't actually know what Richard's doing these days, but Richard, quite rightly, when I first started, saw, who's this kid working a magazine? He could write a review that could mess up all of my sales on something just because he doesn't understand. Yeah. And I remember having a discussion ironically, with Simon Weir, who, the ex-owner of PSN. He also used to be the COO of Future Publishing. And so I've known him for a very long time. And I remember him having conversations with Mick Taylor, who was our editor at the time, and probably with Paul Smith as well, talking about exactly like, the responsibility of reviews. Yeah. If you say something that's bad without contacting the manufacturer, you can't just say something's terrible and, not be able to reason it. You want to find out why. Yeah. But, you know, I was going to say it didn't happen often back then, but actually it used to happen quite often back then, because you've got to think that there was so many people throwing stuff against the wall to see if it sticks. It's not like now where things are much more refined.
Yeah.
You know, it was a kind of a different landscape back then.
You think about the development curve of mountain bikes back in the early 90s, maybe late 90s, early noughties, and some of the radical bikes you'd see. I was talking to somebody just yesterday about the Klein Mantra. And
that was a mistake.
You saw, frames like that, and it's like, what were they thinking? Like, what were they smoking when they thought, that's the product?
I mean, on paper, that particular bike, kind of similar to the Trek Y bikes and stuff. I get how they got there. They're like, we want it to pedal like a hardtail, but also have suspension. And they're like, so we like to stand up and pedal, so we want it to be rigid. So let's have the pivot really high, unified design. And then when you sit down, the whole thing sort of cantilevers in the middle.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
wild,
but kind of cool in a horrible way. It's I'm sure and many people know I've got a bit of a thing for the retro stuff. I've never been under an illusion. I know it's mostly all rubbish, but it was, I've been lucky enough that mountain biking is quite literally, I grew up around it, and I've seen the whole sport landscape. I've seen it all change and mature as I've been growing into my career within it.
It's nostalgia, isn't it?
Massively, yeah. And it's old enough now that it has got, I wouldn't quite say history, but it has got, getting close to that.
Yeah.
It has got stuff that is not vintage, just old.
How did you? So I've spoken to Jonesy before about his days at Dirt, and how I've spoken to his other half before about just products turning up at the door day after day, mounting up, and he just had this sort of unbelievable amount of bike kit that he had to either review or push to one side. It must have been insane in the office at MBUK. Absolutely
that, yeah. And sometimes it's almost like a free for all as well, because you get stuff that was addressed in a mag, addressed to you personally. Certain manufacturers would realise, oh, we know he likes that. Let's send him one of those. And it was like it was bonkers actually how much stuff. I've got some keepsakes. I've got like a little tub in there of very few specific things that like meant a lot to me or were really important products. But everyone around me ended up on old test products and cranks for the paint that's all come off, and you never ended up putting a review out because they decided to pull them from manufacturing. And
how often did you have to give stuff back, and how often did you get to keep stuff?
It depends what it was. Bikes always went back. Like big things always went back. Helmets, obviously you're going to use it, so no one wants that back. Grips, like disposables, consumables, obviously you just use them, which was a lot of stuff for mountain biking. Tires, wheels, drivetrains, all the stuff that actually is really handy to have. There's constantly a circle of stuff.
So you left MBUK, and then I understand Silverfish sort of played a part in the next stage of your career.
So I
maybe briefly mention Silverfish and who they were.
So Silverfish were and still are a distributor of. I think they, used to pride themselves on being a bit more independent in the way they thought of distribution. So Darren Mabbott and his wife Sarah started the company. I can't quite remember how they started it, but I know they did a lot of travelling and stuff. And Darren was a bit of an old hippie and used to love some of the Canadian brands like Cove, for example. And they more or less started just distributing single brands like that from their garage. And then suddenly, they were doing it right at the right time. They both had the right work ethic. And they turned from just a husband and wife combo into a small distributor, into a bigger distributor, into a really big distributor. Started taking on brands. It's actually quite an incredible journey. You see this with a lot of companies. Like I think Chain Reaction, for example, sorry for the little tangent here, is a bit of a misunderstood company because a lot of people are like, oh, they're just the big guys like Amazon, they're doing people over. It's like, no, they're not. They started as a tiny little, in fact, they started from the boot of their dad's car, selling tyres and inner tubes and stuff at cyclocross races and things like that. Yeah. And then the first shop they had was, I think it was like an old, like a hair salon or something like that. You couldn't even put a bike in it sideways. It was so small. So they've been there and they worked their way up. They just had a different vision and wanted to do things differently.
I've been to the factory there in Northern Ireland, and I was a little bit surprised actually that it wasn't this just huge thing that it kind of shows itself to be. But it is a bit more. I don't want to polite word is to say, but it's more rough and ready than it.
Yeah. It's but Silverfish, they've always been a bunch of people that wanted to, clearly led by Darren and Sarah, they want to distribute the stuff that they want to ride. That's what they always did from the beginning. And obviously, he's a businessman. He's not going to do something that's not going to make money, but it would still hand pick things that they wanted to bring in. So, Rocky Mountain, Cove, Raceface, loads of cool brands, especially at that time, early 2000s, sort of late 90s, when free ride was becoming a thing.
Yeah.
They were perfectly positioned with ultimately the perfect cool brands. You had Madison, had Shimano and the bigger brands, but that wasn't their bag. They didn't want to do that. But anyway, Darren, being one of those people, a lot of fingers, a lot of pies, a lot of things going on. He acquired a website called Factory Jackson from the previous owner, Ollie, and he didn't know what to do with it. He liked it and it was just there. And we had a conversation at Core Bike Show on one of the evenings there. This is an industry trade show, and I used to go there as a journalist to take photos and see the new products, basically. And it was always good to spend a bit of time with people like Darren, who always have different insight to the industry. And we got chatting, and I don't know how we got onto it, but he pretty much was like, "How do you fancy doing this?" And it was just like, "Yeah, great." So by that point, I'd been at MBUK for, it was 13 and a half years when I left. So a long time. And I actually think I almost overstayed my welcome there. So I could never have got to the editor position because the editor at the time was being editor. There wasn't really a path to do anything else from what I was doing. And I didn't want to do anything else other than that. And I kind of just thought, well, maybe this is the right time to just move on. And ironically, a couple of years previous, or maybe a year previous, I'd gone on a sabbatical with my then girlfriend, and we came back engaged. And actually, that would have been the perfect moment to change career then. But I stayed a bit longer and got a bit long in the tooth and got a bit salty. And it was like, need to go while I still love this thing.
Yeah.
So good times, but on with the next.
Sometimes change is healthy.
Yeah.
It can be.
And running a website for Darren was an interesting thing because although I'd taken photos my whole life, I never really had good camera gear because I was always on shoots with people like Steve Bear and Russ Burton and Seb Rogers. And I would always pick up their B camera and just take some pictures. And I specifically remember actually Russ Burton kind of joking, saying to me, like, "Oh, if you ever pick up a camera, I'll be really pissed off with you." And obviously I did. Again, I spent a load of cash and got a camera set up for Factory Jackson and loved it. I sort of relearned, photography all over again, and, learned about, search engine optimization and just writing differently for web and just becoming self-sufficient. And suddenly I was doing about 20 things all at once at the same time. And going to places like Eurobike thinking like, this is mad. I'm putting up a thing every day with more than anyone else is doing every day. I'm doing this on my own. Yeah. And it was wicked. And actually I had no intention of moving on, but I had an opportunity literally land in my lap and I took it. I think Darren was actually a bit sad at the time because I think he thought that we could have really good plans together. And I do still feel bad about letting him down. But we've kind of buried that now, and I think he understands that what I went on to do was actually I was kind of supposed to do that. I feel like just talking about bikes and stuff is literally I could talk all day long. This might ramble on a bit.
It's good. So you went from photography and sort of writing a lot in the world of publishing, and then slowly the industry started to transition into video creation. How did you find that transition and sort of what involvement did you have to starting to create video?
Well, whilst working at Factory Jackson, I was approached by Bike Channel. So it was an Italian-owned terrestrial TV channel, and it was huge in Italy, and they were about to do the UK, and I think they wanted to do other countries as well. And they said, "Oh, in addition to all our road content, we want to have a mountain bike show. Do you want to anchor it? We've got Anna Glowinski, and we want you. So both of you can be like the on-screen, not a couple, but a couple of mountain bikers. And what we want you to do is travel the UK, go to different riding spots, and each show is going to be almost like a magazine format, showing a bit about how you get there, what's on offer there, what the riding's like, maybe have a maintenance thing in there, and a few other random parts to the video, maybe interview a local something like that. And Liam Murphy, he was the filmmaker for that, and the three of us basically travelled the UK. And I did this at the same time as doing Factory Jackson, which was great for Factory Jackson because I got content everywhere I went, and I was getting video content, which I was using on there as well. So it was making my job better and easier, but also I was getting more out of it as well. And did the shows, and still can't quite believe it was actually on real TV, which is weird. I don't even have copies of them. I've got the original trailer, and I know Liam Murphy has got them, so I need to, kind of forgot actually, need to get the videos off him because I want to just have them for keepsakes. And I was terrified. Anna Glowinski was and is amazing. She's such a good natural presenter. She's really, really good. I know she's doing stuff for Shimano and various people at the moment, but I can't thank her enough because I had no intention of going into video or anything. Didn't realise it's ever going to be a thing. But both her and Liam were like, yeah, all right, you're a bit awkward with some stuff, but as soon as you're talking about actual bikes, we're like, we can't shut you up. Like, that, there's a thing there that you're quite good at. And I was like, oh, yeah, cool, thanks, but whatever. And then it got round to doing season 2. And for whatever reason, we collectively decided to not do season 2. But they wanted to. And at roughly about the same time, I was going to meet a long-term friend, a guy called Tim Durant, who used to be the art editor for Redline magazine, which is a car magazine that Future Publish used to run. And I've hung out with him since 2001 when we basically both moved to Bath for our jobs on the magazines. I was going to meet him for a beer after work, and he was working at the time at Shift Active Media. And he wasn't quite ready, so I sat in reception waiting for him. Simon Weir came down the stairs and was like, oh, well, what are you doing here? I was like, oh, I'm meeting Tim. He's like, oh, going next door for a beer, are you? He was like, yeah, weekly catch-up sort of thing. And he was like, oh, come and have a little tour of the building. So I went inside, and it was, bearing in mind that this building, 30 Monmouth Street, was the original registered building for Future Publishing. So I knew the building very well from the Future Publishing days. And then going in there now, it was like, well, this is different. It's now called Monmouth Street Studios. And Simon had gutted it, it's concrete floors, and each floor had a different colour theme to it. And it was amazing. And it was like a hive of activity. And I remember thinking, well, this is really cool. And we sat in his office and just chatted about video and photos and online and this and that. And he basically said, oh, GCN's gone really well. We've done GMBN, and I want you to do GMBN Tech. And I was a bit like, sorry, I don't really know what's just happened. I've gone to meet a friend for a beer, and you've just offered me a job in a roundabout way. And he was like, yeah, okay, maybe this is a bit soon. We'll have another discussion, but just, put that in your head sort of thing. Have a think about it. And I went out, had some beers with Tim, chatted about it. And I remember thinking, like, I don't really know just what happened. Like, absolutely not expecting anything. Thought about it, spoke to Steph about it, and she was like, why are you even thinking about it? She goes, like, Darren's great and he will understand. Like, he might not like it, but he'll get that this is a different sort of progression for career. So I went and had another meeting with Simon, and we discussed things in a bit more detail, and he told me a bit more about GCN and the moves with YouTube and stuff. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is the future. Like, no one's doing anything like this at the moment. No. And I've got an opportunity to get in now. And I was like, yep, where do I sign? Basically. And he got the contract sorted out and stuff. And then I went away and I felt awful. So I had to speak to Darren. And I remember literally not knowing what to do. And I put it off for a few days. And I still do feel a bit bad because he was on holiday at the time. And I messaged him and I was like, I'm really sorry. I'm going to leave. Yeah. I've been offered an opportunity that I was not looking for, didn't want a new opportunity. It's just completely accidentally happened. And I think he was a bit pissed off at me, and that actually hurt because I was like, oh, I've let him down, the guy that really gave me a chance. And I did feel bad about it. And, but luckily it was short-lived because he's a really cool guy, really supportive. Yeah. And once he'd seen a few videos, he was like, okay, I get it. Yeah. I get it. He's like, good luck. Like, this is a good thing for you.
Fair play.
And then weirdly, so he was the distributor for Mondraker Bikes at the time. I rode Mondraker Bikes alongside other bikes while I was working for Factory Jackson. I'd ridden Mondraker Bikes, reviewing them when I was working on MBUK, and I've still got my 2012 Foxy XR, okay, the one that literally is a line in the sand for me in terms of bike handling. Yeah, and Darren was working for him, and now I'm working for Mondraker. So that's kind of just a weird. That tells you how small the bike industry is.
Yes.
You know, it feels like this big, huge thing, but actually, when you're in it, it's kind of not.
It's amazing how connected everybody is in the industry, and yeah, you do trip over the same people on a regular basis, and it's like you say, it's quite a small environment, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, so for you, I've had this conversation with Chris Smith and also with Rob Bride, EMTB, about talking to camera and developing that skill. I mean, it seems like it's something that you took to quite easily, but everyone has to get through that first early awkward stage. I think I'm still there, of talking to camera. How did you develop that skill, and what were the techniques that you used?
Well, it's funny because literally my first day at work, I turned up and there was a floor meeting. No one had told me there was a floor meeting. I walked in right in the middle of it, and I was almost. I think a few people kind of killed me with their eyeballs, so I sort of interrupted, and I was like, "Oh, okay, sit there, be quiet." And Martin Ashton was like, "Oh, come with me." I went straight with him, went straight into Dirt Shed and straight on camera, and I was like, "Oh, okay. I guess I'm not having an induction or any of these things." And he was like, "No, you don't need that." And we just chatted, and what you see is the first appearance of me on GMBN is literally I'd been in the building about 10 minutes and was straight on camera. So no prep, no nothing. And I think looking back at it, yeah, it was really awkward. But Martin I known a long time, so it was super easy just to chat to him about stuff. And did this, but then at the back of my mind, I knew that I wasn't there to be on GMBN. I knew that I was there to start the tech channel, and obviously that wasn't public news. So I did feel a bit of a fifth wheel on GMBN. Because although I know a lot about bikes and I'm comfortable riding bikes and I've ridden bikes with, many top riders around the world, I'm not Blake Sampson. Blake, the most charismatic guy I know. He's amazing. Like, pretty sure you could push him to the floor and he'd be like, "Oh, are you okay? What made you do that?" He's like the nicest dude ever. And Neil, he's actually one of the funniest humans ever. You'd never know because he's got such a poker face. But, and again, I know Neil a long time. In fact, that first road trip I did, Neil was on parts of that road trip. And Martin, but, I knew I wasn't one of them. I'm not there for the entertainment. What I do is talk about things in detail. That's what I'm really good at. And so I did feel weird for a little while. And the first time I think the viewers appreciated me was when there was a game of bike riding against Blake in Whistler. And I bunny hopped straight onto a picnic bench and basically just rode straight over it on a bike. And I nearly beat him, but I kind of crashed. And and Blake won. He always wins a game of bike. Never play a game of bike with Blake Sampson. Okay, you ain't gonna win, whoever you are. And I think the viewers were like, "Oh right, you can ride a bike." And I was like, "Well, I know I can ride a bike, but that's not what I'm here for." And this was about the time when they were going to launch EMBN and GMBN Tech and GCN Tech. Now, in the background, we're doing some work, we're doing some show reels for those and starting planning out the channels. And I think this must have been about 3 days before we broke up for Christmas. And the plan was to launch in spring the following year. And Simon Weir was like, "Change my mind, we're launching in January, all 3 channels." And I remember thinking like, what would you mean? That's not possible. And I remember like Jonesy, and in fact, actually, I don't know if Jonesy was... Yeah, he was part of it by then. All of us were a bit like, "Hey, like that's not possible." And Swear was like, Simon Weir was, he's like, "Right, I want a weekly show from all of you. I want one of these on the channel, one of these, and you've got to be ready to go on." I can't remember the date in January, what the first video was, but this was like just before we broke up for Christmas. So I think everyone was a bit like, "Well, okay, so all hands on deck," but we did it. And actually, it made me realise a lot of things. The way that Simon chose to just do it, get on with it, that is exactly why that company succeeded. And that's exactly why that company is so big. It's because of him. And that's how it got there. But anyway, my first show was a GMBN Tech show. Did it on my own in the tiny little old school set. And we put some OSB board up in the background, which is, I find pretty funny because anyone that's got a mountain bike related show now has got OSB in the background. I'm like, you don't want that because it just sucks the light up so bad. And and I chatted for half an hour to the camera about bikes and tech and the amount of gears and, you know, just stuff that to me was really easy. And the cameraman at the time was like, where did that come from? I was like, oh no, it was easy. And I did it. And the first comments on that first video were like, they're like, oh, that's what you're there for. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It kind of all just came together. And yeah, went from there really.
Let's talk about the comments, because you can see it as the more toxic side of the internet, should we say. The comments can be both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
How have you found it over the years, and how has your attitude towards the comment section changed?
So, I mean, for starters, I think all of those PSN channels are very unique. I mean, I know GMBN Tech especially was, but they're largely positive. Because of the content is positive, there isn't any negativity. If there is, it will be in a positive stance. Because of that, the comments largely reflect that. And on the tech channel especially, because it was a knowledge-based channel, we were giving people free information about stuff. The whole remit is to help people. And because of that, it was a really positive, you know, every now and then someone would be like, oh, you did that to the wrong talk setting or this or that. But mostly it was really positive. And if you weren't available or someone from PSN wasn't available to return in the comments, the community would help. And I still firmly believe that that particular channel's community is the strongest in anything I've read online. You know, a lot of the big pros that do stuff like Sam Pilgrim and that, firstly, I don't know how he continues to keep doing stuff the way he does. Incredible. But a lot of people, you know, he could put the world's worst video out and people will love it because it's him. So they're kind of blowing smoke up a bit. You know, it's not quite the same thing. You know, I'm not, his stuff is amazing. I'm not going against that. I'm more referring to the fact that this was a knowledge-based channel, so it's quite a unique position. People ask for help, you give them whatever you can. So they can't really throw that back at you. No. Whereas, you know, when it's about people, then yeah, things can get a bit awkward. But, you know, I was told to not read the comments to start with. Of course, you read the comments, don't you? Obviously. And then after a while, I was like, I'm just going to leave that alone for a bit, and then come back to it. And then it's, by that point, it's okay. But anyone new doing it, you're going to get it to a point, you know, whether it's one comment or many comments. And all it takes sometimes, unfortunately, is one comment. And it can cut through pretty hard. But I was, by that point, pretty thick-skinned and nothing really bothers me anymore. I know who I am. Like, you can say what you want. You know, I had far worse when I was at MBUK. I used to get heavily bullied working at MBUK, you know, getting letters coming in. People bothering to write stuff in letters and posting it. Really malicious stuff. And then you meet them in the flesh and they're your best friend. And you're like, oh, okay. All right, I get it.
I actually found that the time that I've spent involved with creating YouTube videos, that it's the positive comments that really give vindication for the time that you spent doing it. It actually makes you think, okay, that's why I do it. And it gives you that incentive to carry on.
100%, yeah. One positive comment can delete loads of others. You know, so, but yeah, I'm pretty fortunate, and I think most of the people that I've worked with on YouTube stuff are also fairly fortunate as well because of the positive nature. There's obviously exceptions to that, but most of the time it's been all right, I think.
You said about meeting people face to face. What's it like when you meet people out at a trail centre or somewhere like that? People must want to get a picture with you or speak with you. That must be quite a nice part of the job. Yeah,
so I mean, it's nice and strange at the same time, and it's also different wherever you go. So I'm kind of used to it from the magazine days to an extent, because anytime I'd go to like the bike show, you know, the viewers that did like you would be desperate to come and chat to you and maybe get an autograph or whatever. But obviously that whole realm has changed to selfies and other stuff now. But I wasn't quite ready for how fast it blew up with the GMBN thing. To the point, like, a lot of places I just won't go and ride because it's overwhelming with people. And actually, in the long term, you can say this is because of me, because it hasn't affected the others, but it's really affected where I ride, where I want to ride. You know, there's a lot, you know, Wind Hill Bike Park, for example, it's just like, you couldn't pay me to go and ride there. And actually, I love riding there.
It's a great place.
But I'm just like not interested in going there because no matter what I do, there's, again, this is from me, there's eyeballs on me the whole time. Expectant eyeballs. I'm like, I was never Blake Sampson. I was never there to go and do backflips and that. I'm there to talk about bikes. That's my job. But yeah, there's an expectancy to be a certain person and be a certain way. And it's difficult to manage that stuff. And like I say, I'm pretty thick-skinned with this stuff. And I'm aware there's been other people over the years that have been less so. And difficult, yeah.
I think you need to come and do some off-piste riding in North Wales.
100%. Count me in. but you know, like, I'm okay with it as well. Yeah. Like, you know, I've just told you this stuff, but at the same time, I am comfortable with who I am. I can't stand the eyeballs, and I can't stand that very British thing that there is. You go to a trail centre and people, and you're like, just come and say hi or don't.
Yeah.
Don't like whisper to your mates. It's just weird.
Yeah.
You know, and then the flip side, you go to America and everyone's like, yo, and coming over and you're like, well, I'm from the UK. We don't do that here, you know. But after a while, you just sort of dial into it. Yeah. You know, you go to Seattle, all right, need to be prepared for the Californians, need to prepare for, you know, everything is like the sunniest and the best and the most positive thing. As soon as you're on board with it, it's amazing. It's great. But you come back to sunny old UK, it's not quite the same, is it? But people are great. And actually, because of the nature of people wanting to get selfies and stuff, it becomes a much more friendly society, I think. I think it is awkward to start with, but once you just realise who you are and what we all are, it's fine. It's people just hanging out.
Yeah.
I still go and get selfies with people. In fact, I'm going to get a selfie with Martin Ashton tonight.
Yeah.
Because he's still one of my greatest aspirations,
you know,
as a character. You know, and Hans Ray is my greatest of all time. And he is still every bit as much of an inspiration to me as he was when I first saw him at Ali Pali 92 or whatever it was.
Yeah. Mondraker, let's talk about your current and future.
Yeah.
What helped you make the decision to join the brand?
Well, I think kind of the same as the past. It wasn't a case of actively looking to do something different. It was more a case of like, I've done what I've been doing a long time, and don't take this the wrong way. I loved what I've achieved and what we've achieved with GMBN and GMBN Tech. I'm really proud of it. And I'm really, you know, part of walking away from it was actually the most difficult thing I've done to date. And I still feel quite emotional about it because it's such a important chapter in my life in understanding who I am and what I can actually do. But also, I'd made so many videos, and some of those videos to me were some of the best things I've ever done. I'm like, I'm not sure I can beat that. I'm not sure I want to keep making videos when I think that particular video is one of my favorites. I mean, 3 particular videos that stand out. I made one, why I love Dior XT from Shimano, why I love RockShox, and the Clunker. So that Clunker bike, I think I said it at the time, I've said it since. When I saw that bike and the entire story of how that came to be in the UK and how I got to see the bike, I felt like I had gone completely full circle from when I started mountain biking, from day one to then. I thought, after this video, if I never had to make a video again, I'd be all right with that. That could be my last video I ever make. I'd be content with that. And I still feel like that. I think that was, you know, it might not have the views of some of the other videos, but for me, in the journey I had to go on to make that, I was like, it doesn't really get much better. So I thought, I need to change the direction.
Jonesy actually said to me, you need to see this video that Doddy's made. I was working with him, I think, when one of your Why I Love videos came out.
Yeah.
And I thought, for him to say I need to watch it, it must be good. And I know, honestly, I don't know who edited it, but it absolutely blew me away.
I don't want to upset whoever it was.
It was an incredible video and so well scripted, and it just did. It was perfection to me in a video on YouTube, and so I can understand why you say that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm proud of all the videos I make. You know, there's nothing that's gone out that I've had my name on that I'm not happy with.
Yeah.
You know, there's stuff I've said no to, and there's stuff that we've made, and I'm like, no, we're not putting that out. Let's axe it, or you know, cut it up and use some of the assets for social or whatever. But no, I'm extremely proud of everything. Like, absolutely no regrets. I think it's been a brilliant journey there.
So tell me what your job will now entail at Mondraker.
So I'm forgetting what my job title is, I'm kind of the outward-facing, English-speaking representative for the brand.
Okay.
Kind of like the face of the brand, I guess you'd say. So Mondraker obviously make very high-tech bikes. They've got several unique things. I won't go into too much detail. You can be able to see this looking on their own website or the stuff that I'm going to be making with them later. I'm going to be their master of ceremonies for events. So I'm going to be, when they're launching new bikes, I'm going to be the person doing the presentations for that. I'm going to be the person riding with the media, riding with bike dealers, riding with distributors, helping them understand the technology in the bikes. I'm going to be doing internal stuff. I think they've got me down as technical training as part of my job. So the skills that I've kind of built through presenting technical videos, like about, I don't know, bleeding a brake or whatever, they kind of want the same thing internally because they have this production line in-house. And as part of their production line, they've got, I'm going to say it's 40 work stands, the electronic or the electric park ones, and they're double-sided. So it's 80 workstations. And on each of those is TV screens. And currently it's just like tighten this bolt to 10 Newton meters and stuff. And I think we want to revise how we do that. Because what they actually do is they're training local people to come and work there, which is great because they're giving them a proper skill set.
To me, Mondraker always seemed like a very forward-thinking brand. Their bike design has always been quite radical. And, they've taken a direction that is different to almost the majority of the industry on some of their bike design.
Yeah.
Is that one thing that attracts you?
100%, yeah. I mean, I'm ridiculously fortunate that I've worked with so many different brands. Like, I don't even know how many brands I've worked with over the years. And there's been a few marked things that I've really wanted to say and do. And like that RockShox video, that was definitely one of them. And the DRXT, that was always like the mark of, yeah, you've got XT on your bike. Like, it's still, to me, that's more important than XTR or anything else you want to make. Like, XT is the thing. And as far as bikes go, there's been loads of amazing bikes I've ridden. But honestly, that 2013 or 2012 Foxy XR, the fundamental thing that happened when I rode that bike was the current bike I had then was a Ibis Mojo HD. So I had 160mm travel front and rear, and I was riding a size XL, which I think would have had an 80 or 85mm stem on it as standard. I had a 70, which was as short as you could go on that bike, and it was just far too small for me. I loved the bike, the suspension, the DW link, it all worked great, it looked beautiful, and it was about as big as you could get in those days, you know, give or take 10mm maybe. And then that was the size XL. And then Rob Weaver was like, you know, he had the prototype, he was like, you need to try one of these. And I was like, all right, I'll try it. And I looked at it, I was like, man, it's got a big forehead, it's got this weird stem, it's kind of like weird, not the nicest weird either. And one ride I was like, oh my god, this changes everything for me. And there's two things that change things. The first thing was the length of the bike. Now, this isn't just the fact that it's got like long geometry, it's the fact that it was the first mountain bike I'd ever ridden that truly fit me. So that made a significant impact on me. So suddenly, instead of being this tall person with my weight really high up and the wheels really close together, my head was kind of in the same position, you know, almost like equilateral triangle with where the wheels were. So suddenly my weight was where it's supposed to be on the bike. I'm like talking to Rob, I was like, this is what it's like for you on all bikes. You know, like this to me, this has changed everything. And as I got used to the bike, I had to change everything. My brake lever position, the tyres I was running, the suspension settings. I started getting pinch front punctures on the bike because I was just riding into things harder with more confidence in a different way. And I actually had to stop riding it on a magazine because it was so different to all the other bikes we were testing. So I was going off bikes with 70 or 80mm stems to the 10mm stem. And when you get back on a longer stem again, you almost can't ride them. It's almost ruined bikes. And it had such an impact. I actually spoke to Israel, who's I'm not actually sure of Israel's job title. Sorry, Israel, but he's product developer, R&D. He does everything, basically. And he's one of the reasons that they've done such great products in the past and still are. He was just like, I think like you should just keep riding that bike in the background, you know, tell me what's going on with it. And that early bike was plagued by niggles because the back end of the bike was essentially the same as their conventional geometry version, but suddenly the capability of this bike was much more so than a regular one. They were going through bearings all the time, snapping rear axles and just stuff that I wasn't doing previously. You know, this is nothing about my ability. I was just suddenly, there was a bike that I could ride it as I wanted to ride. So yeah, I changed completely in what I was doing. And I got the following model, which was one of the first bikes to have 27.5-inch wheels, or 650Bs. And working on the magazine at the time, Jeff Stieber from Intense Bikes contacted us. He's like, hey, you know, why don't you come and see us before Sea Otter, you know, make some cool content. And if you want, maybe we'll make a frame up. You can watch us do it. And jokingly, I was like, could I pick the geometry? And he was like, yeah, sure. And I don't know what he thought at the time, but there was only one thing I was going to do with it. And I basically more or less copied the geometry of the Mondraker Foxy. And I've got a little geometry chart on the wall in there. And if you look at it, considering this was 2014, and some brands still aren't even up to that reach, which is mad. Yeah. So this was a size larger, not even an extra large. But went there and visiting Jeff, and I showed him the stem. And as soon as he saw the stem, he got it from the whole moto thing. He was like, okay, I think I get it. But he didn't actually have any tubes long enough to make the down tube for the bike. So the top tube came from some other random project. The down tube was off. It was for a prototype downhill bike that Kavarik was going to ride and never got to ride. Sorry, Chris. And we put the bike together, but it was a little bit shorter than what I wanted it. And took the bike to Sea Otter, and it got loads of attention just there. I think Robin from Enduro magazine, he saw it, took some pictures of it, wrote a thing on it. And I went to see Dane he would have been a Giro at the time. He's now at Liat Industries. And he was like, what are you riding? And I was like, man, you're riding one of those old Santa Cruz bikes that's like short, tall and steep. The geometry, the complete opposite to what this is at the time. Obviously, their geometry now is nothing like what it was. And he rode it and he looked at me, he's like, whoa, this is a thing. And I was like, not yet, it's not, but it's a thing. And actually, he congratulated me on the roll, and he recited actually in the comments about when I showed him that bike, and he was like, well, this is really advanced. Yeah. So off the back of that trip with that bike with the same geometry as the Mondraker, he got an XL front end for his bikes. I think he was on a medium or a medium large at the time, put the XL front end on the bike and ran a shorter stem on it, and was like, whoa, my God, the difference you can make in weight in the front of the bike and stuff. Yeah. And well, yeah, actually, and I've kind of, without realising it, kind of always been on a quest to find the right bike for me. And I've always followed what they're doing. I've had several of their bikes over the years. So yeah, it was just, couldn't be an easier brand to work for in terms of like completely believe in what they do.
So we have to move on to e-bikes. They've brought that brand philosophy, their design philosophy into the world of e-bikes now.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first experience riding an e-bike?
Yeah, it was, I'm going to say it was a Cube.
Okay.
And it had one of the earlier Bosch systems on there with I can't remember what the battery was, probably like 420 or 480 watt-hour. The external battery on the down tube, like pretty ugly looking bikes. No offense to Cube, I think all of them were at the time, because it's all just, let's see if we can bolt it on and try it. But I remember I rode my local trails and I thought, I don't like it, because as soon as you go over the power of the motor, you're pedaling through treacle and everything didn't work. And I don't know who it was, but someone said to me, ride your local loop backwards. And I went and rode the local loop backwards, which changed everything, and actually changed riding for me as well in a weird way, because I'd never ridden it backwards because of the way it works. Why would you do those slight uphills for ages on a regular bike when you can enjoy them the other way? And I remember thinking, this is strange. This is like same but different. All the spots that are familiar, but I'm seeing all new angles of stuff. And suddenly I was approaching uphills in a different way. I was like, well, this is amazing. But it kind of took a little while to sort of to take hold, I guess you'd say. But then when I joined GMBN, obviously I knew in the background they wanted to launch the electric mountain bike network. Started seeing a lot of bikes coming in, trying a lot of bikes. And what we saw, even in the first year, really, the rate at which progression happened, we've never seen it in cycling. Like it's if you think that really the e-bike movement kind of really started around 2017, something like that, and what's happened in that short time is mind-blowing, really.
Could you see that huge effect that it would have on the industry?
No, because I think, like many other people, I was on the fence to start with as well. And I was like, why do I want it to do that? I know who it's for. That's not for me. Yeah. But then the more I rode them in different situations, I wasn't trying to compare them. I wasn't trying to replace my existing bikes. You know, I still think I will always prefer the feel of a natural bike because I like to suffer a bit. And I know you can get that on an e-bike, but the terrain where I ride a 130mm bike most of the time. You know, middle of winter, it's really hard work. It's really physical. And I like that. Not always. Sometimes you just don't want to go out because the weather's so bad. But I like the feeling of a bit of pain and how you feel. But an e-bike, there's an accomplishment. It's a whole different thing. And obviously where you ride them is a dramatically different thing as well. So locally, I'm not convinced that they're, you know, maybe some of the lighter power e-bikes. Yeah, I've had my eyes opened on those recently. Full power bikes for me locally, perhaps not. But yeah, I was on the fence, and now well, they're here.
Yeah, there's one just in there. I think that my personal view is that e-bike tech has had this massively steep development curve. Do you feel like it's starting to plateau, starting to level off, or do you think that there's still going to be massive changes in the industry?
No, I think you're going to see a lot more changes again. It's definitely plateaued when some standards come together and it becomes about refinement, but then you think of the advancements that we're going to see in battery tech and motor tech. You're already seeing systems like Fazua and TQ with really compact units that, they're not comparable, and they're not supposed to be comparable to the full-size units. They're a different thing. And you imagine, at the moment, you've got batteries at like 360, 380 watt hour. You're going to be able to have batteries of the same weight with much more capacity that will charge faster. It's mad what's going to be happening in the next few years, I think.
I'm so intrigued by what's to come, and maybe you've got a better eye on the future than many people do. Where do you see things going in perhaps 5 years' time? Is the weight a big factor, do you think?
Yes and no. I think the weight's always going to be there on some of the bigger full fat e-bikes, but I think now that people are starting to understand the capabilities of the bikes, the weight isn't seen as a bad thing. Weight is seen as a thing. You can use the weight. The weight gives you confidence. The weight gives you stability. You know, once you don't fight it, it's a great thing. But obviously that's not for everyone. Yeah. And I've been riding a bike with a TQ motor, the Neat, recently. And I've got to say, when I first looked at the bike, I thought, wow, that's amazing, but that's not for me. Because I'm, 92 kilos. I'm the person on paper that's going to pick a bike with Bosch or Shimano or a big system. Not a lightweight system. You know, I'm going to, kill the battery too easily. But actually, I was completely surprised by it. And so you can't compare it in any way to a full fat motor, but it's not supposed to be. So you've got a lighter battery with less capacity, you've got a smaller motor with less torque. But the whole thing that you get is a bike that feels really natural. So e-bikes, in no bad way, can feel quite mechanical and electronic. That's also what's really good about them. Yeah. You can go out for an easy ride and have the bike pull you up the hill, or you can go out twice as far, twice as hard in the same amount of time, or you can just do way more and ride up stuff that is just simply not possible, which is really that's the sort of element that I like, going to places that you just wouldn't bother or you can't get to. But the new lighter bikes, actually, I've done a complete U-turn. And although I don't have one, I do plan on getting one. And I think with what I like from a bike, I like to feel everything. I want to feel connected to the ground. I want to move the bike around. I don't want to have to use the bike like you do with the bigger weight bikes. I actually see everything that I love about a bike in that mid-weight bike.
The thing
if you call it mid-weight, you know what I mean, the light
semi-skimmed.
Semi-skimmed, yeah, we'll go with that.
The thing I like about Mondraker actually is that they are using different motors across their range, and when a lot of people see the Bosch motor as sort of the industry standard, but you say about it feeling, whether it feels quite analog or whether it feels quite digital. I often find with the Bosch motor, it can be a bit more sort of switchy on and off, and whereas the Shimano motor can sometimes feel a bit more analog, I guess. It almost feels a bit more part of you. And I sometimes find that the Shimano motor perhaps suits that earlier e-bike rider that's sort of just getting into the industry, getting into e-bikes, whereas the Bosch motor is something that, well, if you look at their race motor, for example, is something that's a completely different beast altogether.
Yeah, I mean, I've not ridden the race motor yet. I hope I do get to ride that. I've ridden the Performance CX Gen 4, ridden EP8, EP6, EP801, TQ, Fazua. I've ridden a few systems, but none of them at this stage, you know, you couldn't hang anything on me. You know, I haven't ridden enough time on them, but I'm going to have a Bosch bike, a TQ bike, and a Shimano bike, so I can spend. So maybe when we catch up next time, I'm also going to try and ride other people's systems, because I do feel like now I'm on a quest, like a quest for knowledge. Yeah. I need to know everything, ride everything, feel everything, understand it. But already I can see that there's 3 significant different systems that even just Mondraker are using. Yeah, so the Bosch system, I'm astounded by the use of the torque in the system, the way it works. The same torque as the 801 at 85 newton meters, but you can definitely use it in a completely different way. The Shimano, I'd say, feels a bit more natural in terms of how it goes down. You've got to put more into it to get more out of it, whereas the Bosch can literally pull you up a hill. Like, it's quite mad how different they can feel, even though on specs they're not too dissimilar. But then the Shimano system's got arguably some more user-friendly traits, the free shift and the auto shift. Whether that's for everyone or not, you can turn it off. It's there to be used. I think that's a really good thing. And then again, the TQ and the lighter systems. Previously, I thought, yeah, you've got to be a certain weight category rider to get on one of those. Now I'm kind of doubting everything. So I went to Morzine for my first week at work, and I spent 3 days riding morning and afternoon. I mean, I was there for longer than that, but for 3 days just riding the neat. I had the opportunity to ride their crash with the Shimano on there, and I was like, do you know what? I actually just want to ride the neat now, which I surprised myself. So the first ride was about 18 miles. I think we were riding between 18 and 25 miles. A lot of altitude. I didn't record a single ride. I was just there to ride. I know other people there would have done. And on the first ride, I had no reference for how much power the system had, how long the battery would last, other than literally looking at the range. Classic range anxiety. Looking at it, I was like, okay, should I be looking at percentage here or kilometres? Like, what's more worrying for me at this stage? And more importantly, what you want? What you want? Asking everyone else. So I was clearly doing more of the work, because I came back with 40% battery left after that ride, and we did a lot of climbing. We started by riding up the Leger World Cup downhill course, which, if you've been there, you'll appreciate how steep it is. If you haven't, it's way steeper than it looks on TV.
That Moncherie side is insane.
It's really, really, really steep. Yeah. And you know, I was using mostly the sort of the eco setting and just bumping it up into the boost setting just here and there, where I was running out of momentum or having to cross the rain ruts and stuff like that. And got back, felt absolutely beasted. 40% in the tank. I was like, oh, okay, right, I need to use this differently. Next ride came back with 10%. I was like, right, there we go. Found the sweet spot. And as long as you manage it, it's absolutely fine. Right. So you can't expect it to be anything like, and this goes for a lot of those light powered ones, you can't expect them to be the same. It's a different thing. It's not just lighter, you ride them differently. So what I like about those systems are, it does feel like a normal bike. You don't feel the overrun that you get on the bigger systems. You just, you know, and again, when you go over the maximum speed of the system, there's no difference. So that one uses a harmonic pin drive, and it's just like pedaling your regular transmission. Yeah. So for me, actually, that's at the moment standout, and that's the one I would have probably picked, at least on a bit of paper.
We'll definitely cover e-bikes next time we speak, and go into some more detail, maybe into the e-bike tech. Sure. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how you experience the bikes that you're going to be riding. Let's move on to quick fire questions.
Okay.
I've not got many, and they don't have to be that quick, but we'll see how we go. Favorite trail?
The whole enchilada in Moab, all time.
Bike?
27 miles of almost entirely descending over every type of terrain imaginable, from alpine to desert.
I think I'd really struggle to ride in Moab, because my technical riding is not the greatest, and so when I see some of the stuff out there, it's like
Porcupine Rim is tech, and it's not even the techiest stuff there, and it's la 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 tech death to the side.
Yeah.
So it's pretty wild.
Have you ridden is it called the White Line?
No, I haven't. I'd love to tick it off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be easy to ride, and it's all in the head, that one.
Yeah.
But all of that stone is like riding on grip tape on a skateboard.
Okay.
So you can tear knobbles off your tires. There's the only issue you've got is, have you got the leg power to get up something? It's not like, can you ride up or down it? Because you can.
Yeah. Favorite bike park?
It's going to have to be Whistler, isn't it?
I thought you might say that.
Yeah. Even though I'm kind of now intimidated by Whistler. Yeah, it's going to have to be Whistler. I'm going to have to go back again and tick it off again.
Favorite country?
Ooh, could we come back to that one?
Camping out in the wild or staying in a hotel?
Camping, if I can.
Yeah.
Love camping, yeah. Don't do it enough.
Yeah. Internal or external cable routing?
External.
Yeah. From a man that spent a lot of times putting bikes together, taking them apart.
I've got to say, internal is beautiful. But I like working on bikes. If you don't work on bikes, doesn't make any difference either way. But if you work on bikes all the time, external makes your life easier, purely from that perspective.
Do you think many brands will go back to an external design or external setup?
I think partially external, because we've now reached an era, because, in fact, mainly because of e-bikes, a whole new mountain biker has come into mountain biking, not just the people who have always done it. And one of the most important things for them is the aesthetics of the bike. So, you've got to meet function and form at the same time. Really difficult.
Mineral oil or dot brake fluid?
I'm happy with either, to be honest, but mineral oil I have zero issues with.
Yeah, I know. I feel the same. SRAM or Shimano?
Oh, I can't answer that. I actually can't answer that, because elements of both.
Yeah.
What Shimano are particularly excellent at is entry level, and SRAM are very good at high level. So kind of difficult, that one. I kind of see them as PC and a Mac.
Yeah, okay.
I see SRAM like the Mac and Shimano being like a PC.
Yeah.
So if you know what you're doing, you can use a PC to sometimes better effect.
Sure.
Whereas the Mac is like the cool marketing and outward facing.
2023, MTB or EMTB?
For me, I think it's going to be EMTB. And that's not, I don't say, it's not in a preference, but I'm going full in so I can understand everything.
Yeah.
I'm on a quest.
It's good to hear. Enduro or downhill?
Downhill.
Yeah. Okay.
Enduro is too similar to just riding a bike for me.
Yeah.
Downhill's cool. Still the coolest.
I get that. Lightweight e-bike or full fat e-bike? I know we've already touched on this a bit. But...
For the moment, lightweight.
Wow.
Different and surprising, and it hurts me a bit more, so I like
that. Carbon or aluminium?
Depends on what it's for.
Yeah.
To be honest, I love both materials. I love alloy for frames. I especially love alloy for wheels over carbon.
Yeah. Well, you can fix them for one. Yeah. Is there anything... Oh, actually, favourite country?
Do you know, I struggle with that. Somewhere that I've been 3 times now, and I'd go again in a heartbeat, is Iceland.
Okay.
Absolutely loved it there. Just the geography, it's just mind-blowing. I've not been there in the summer season. Would love to go there when it's like virtually light the entire time. Travelled a lot in Southeast Asia, loved it there. Been to North and South Africa, loved it. I've been to a lot of places. I'm really fortunate. There's probably places I'd say will be my favourite country I've not even been to yet. Yeah. There's a lot of places in South America I'd love to visit. I don't know. I'm sorry. Weak answer.
Sometimes there's no place like home either.
My favourite country might be Spain.
Okay.
Not yet, but it might be.
Might be. You just don't know.
Yeah. I want to spend a lot of time there, I think.
I'm not sure if there's anything that we haven't covered yet, but we'll probably get another opportunity to speak again. Thank you very much for speaking to me and being on the podcast. For people that don't currently know, but they probably should, where can people find you?
Instagram at Doddstar1979. I've got a Facebook page at Doddy EMTB Tech. Or is it Doddy? Doddy EMTB it is, in fact. Had to change that the other day.
Instagram's where it's at anyway.
Instagram, yeah. Find me on Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm on there every day.
Cool. Yeah, thanks again. And let's speak again after you've got a bit more time spent on those Mondraker e-bikes.
Thanks for chatting to me. Appreciate your time.
Cheers.